Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 5, Niccolò Machiavelli, and our topic is the doctrine of aggrandizement. In both Prince and Discourses, Machiavelli insisted on the necessity of extending the territory of the state. According to him, either a state must expand or perish. His idea of extension of the dominance of state did not mean the blending of two or more social and political organizations, but the subjection of a number of states under the rule of a single prince or commonwealth. Extension of dominion was easier in one's own country, where there was no difficulty of language or of an institution to overcome in the assimilation of conquered people. Roman state and its policy of expansion perhaps set an ideal before Machiavelli. Force of arms was necessary for both, for political aggrandizement as well as for the preservation of the state. But force must be applied judicially combined with craft. In a monarchy, a prince must pay due respect to the established customs and institutions of the land, which the people hold something as dearer than liberty or life itself. But to establish any kind of order, a monarchical government is preferable, especially when the people are thoroughly corrupt and the laws become powerless for restraint. It becomes necessary to establish some superior power which, with a royal hand and with full and absolute powers, could put a curb upon the excessive ambitions and corruptions of powerful people. Despite the cynicism and bias of Machiavelli's judgment in favor of the prince, there is no mistaking the fact of his esteem for liberal and lawful government. He was inclined favorably for popular government where possible and monarchy were necessary. In both forms, a well trained army of soldiers was needed because a government ultimately was based on force. The ruler must fire the imagination of the subjects by grand schemes and enterprises and should patronize art and literature. An ideal prince thus is an enlightened despot of a non-moral type, while in republic the ruler or the ruling class have to observe the supremacy of law, because the preservation of the state depends upon the excellence of law, which is the source of all civic virtues of the citizens and which determines the national character of its people. Machiavelli holds both monarchy and republican form of government as ideal, but he had very low opinion of aristocracy and nobility, whom he perceived as antagonistic to both the monarchy and the middle class, and that an orderly government required their suppression or expatriation. Side by side, With Machiavelli's dislike of nobility stands his hatred of mercenary soldiers, as they may prove the main cause of lawlessness and disorder and ultimately destruction of the stability of the state. As the art of war is the primary concern of a ruler and the condition of his success in all his ventures, he must aim in possessing a strong, well equipped, and well disciplined force of his own citizens, attached to his interest by ties of loyalty to the state. Behind Machiavelli's belief and his cynicism of his political opinion was national patriotism and a desire for unification of Italy and her preservation for internal disorder and foreign invaders. He frankly asserted that duty towards one's own country overrides all other duties and scruples. Now, the next point is evaluation. Machiavelli's political theory were not developed in a systematic manner. They were mainly in the form of remarks upon particular situations. In the words of Sabine, the character of Machiavelli and the true meaning of his philosophy have been one of the enigmas of modern history. He has been represented as an utter cynic, an impassioned patriot, an ardent nationalist, a political Jesuit, and a convinced Democrat, and unsubscripted seekers after the favor of despots. In each of these views, incompatible as they are, there is probably an element of truth. What is empathetically not true is that any one of them gives a complete picture either of Machiavelli or his thought. This is because behind his philosophy or implicit in his concepts, there often is a consistent point of view which might be developed into a political theory and was in fact so developed after his time. Many political thinkers drew their inspiration and further developed solid and most important political concepts, such as the concept of the state and its true meaning from Machiavelli. In the words of Sabine, Machiavelli, more than any other political thinker, created the meaning that has been attached to the state in modern political uses. The state as an organized force, supreme in its own territory and pursuing a conscious policy of aggrandizement in its relations with other states, became not only the typical modern political institution but increasingly the most powerful institution in modern society. Machiavelli is known as a father of modern political theory. Apart from theorizing about the state, he has also given meaning to the concept of sovereignty, but he never let his belief in the general theory of an omnipotent lawgiver turn into a general theory of absolutism or absolute monarchy, which the subsequent writers Thomas Hobbes did. This concept of sovereignty, internal as well as external, is implicit in his recommendations of despotic power of the ruler for making the state permanent and safe internally and externally. This idea of his was later developed into systematic theory of state sovereignty by French thinker Jean Bodin, while Hugo Grotius built upon a theory of legal sovereignty which was further given a proper formulation of by the English theorist John Austin. Earlier Hobbes, while justifying his social contract, had also borrowed Machiavelli's conception of human nature, on which he built his social contract theory and that of absolute sovereignty. Machiavelli was the first who gave the idea of secularism. In the words of Allen, the Machiavelli state is, to begin with, in a complete sense an entirely secular state, although he attributes to religion an important place in the state. He at the same time separates the two. He placed religion within the state, not above it, and according to him, the observance of the ordinances of religion is the cause of greatness of the commonwealth, as also in their neglect the cause of their ruin. Machiavelli's belief in the potency of material interest of people rather than the spiritual ones influenced Hegel and subsequently Marx in propounding their theory of material origin of the state. Machiavelli was also the first exponent of the theory of aggrandizement, which is the basis of modern power politics. In days today's international politics, each state aims at increasing its economic and military power over other states. Machiavelli was the first pragmatist in the history of political thought. His method and approach to problem of politics were guided by common sense and history. According to Professor Maxey, his passion for the practical as against the theoretical undoubtedly did much to rescue political thought from the scholastic obscurantism to the Middle Ages. Machiavelli's idea of omnipotence of the state and the business of the government was to provide security to person and property and has had a long lasting effect. His ideas were revolutionary in nature and substance, and he brought politics in line with political practice. In the end, it can be said that a good deal of odium is attached to Machiavelli for his cynical disregard for morality and religion. Machiavellism has become a byword for unscrupulousness, but it must be noted that he wrote the Prince and Discourses primarily from the point of view of the preservation of state, every other consideration being secondary. Machiavelli undoubtedly was frank, bold, and honest, besides being practical in understanding the real polity, which made him a favorite of diplomats during his own time to the present. Once we restore Machiavelli to the world in which his ideas were initially formed, we can begin to appreciate the extraordinary originality of his attack on the prevailing moral assumptions of his age. And once we grasp the implications of his own moral outlook, we can readily see why his name is still so invoked whenever the issues of political power and leadership are discussed. Now let us have a look at the summary of the unit. Machiavelli was a product of the age of prolific change and of a period that marked a definite reaction against the authority of the Pope and his preaching of spiritualism. He is known for ushering in the modern age by ridding politics of the vestige of religion. Machiavelli's methods are historical, but he was a political realist, more concerned with the actual working of government than a theory of the state. He built his theories on the premise that men are essentially wicked and selfish. According to him, state is the highest form of human association and an indispensable instrument for the promotion of human welfare. A successful ruler or prince should be a perfect embodiment of shrewdness and self control, making full use of his virtues and vices. Two basic means of success for a prince are judicious use of law and physical force. The ruler is creator of law and of morality. Certain contradictions in Machiavelli's thinking have been pointed out. While he emphasized on the preservation of the state dependent on the excellence of its law and civic virtues of its citizens, his choice of the form of government is unclear. He talks both monarchies along with showing his admiration for an expanded Roman republic. His theories were not developed systematically and are mainly in the form of remarks. Each of his works reflects the truth, but none of them give a complete picture of his thoughts. Now we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.